Welcome back to Coffee with the Authors, where we help you decode the craft and business of writing. In this episode, we're going to talk about writer's block and give you some tips on how you can maybe get around that.
You know, I kind of look at writer's block as maybe more idea block than writer's block, in the sense that it's not always, in fact, it's not usually that you can't write or you've forgotten how to write or you don't know. It's more a lack of specific ideas regarding what you're going to write about. Think about a caution sign on a twisty mountain road saying, you know, slow down, curves ahead or something. So for me, usually when I feel like I have writer's block, like I'm not motivated to write or I just don't know what to write, I take that as a sign that I need to think about my story a little bit more before I, waste time inputting a bunch of words.
And I think that the whole idea for accomplishing that is to unleash or unshackle the creative part of your mind. So you want to occupy your conscious mind and let your subconscious mind get to work. And the way that I found that can happen for me, I found it quite by accident, is that if I am doing the dishes or I'm folding the laundry or I'm vacuuming the house or I'm mowing the yard or I'm doing any one of those kind of things that don't take a lot of thought, but can occupy your mind, that will release the creative part of your mind to work on your story. So the key to that, though, is that you can't be listening to music. You can't be thinking about, what Netflix show you watched last night. You can't be thinking about the plot of somebody else's story, of something you've seen on TV, or you can't listen to podcasts. You can't do any of those things. What you have to do is tune in to your story. So tune into what's going on in your story and then put yourself in a creative state where you are in that part of the story and you can envision things going in this direction or that direction. It's just like you go around and around until you have a breakthrough and you find a way out of it. That approach has worked really well for me. And I find that a lot of people talk about, I got ideas in the shower. We live in California, so we're not supposed to take long showers here. But when I go for a run, I find that to be a very productive time for me plot-wise. So I had a story that I had in the back of my mind for a very long time. And it's actually the story of a character that was part of the SAMMY KEYES series. She's a homeless girl. And I knew how I wanted to write the story, but I didn't know how I wanted it to end. And I'm a big believer in knowing where I'm going before I get started. And for years, I wrestled with how I would end the story. And it took me, I would say, 5-6 years of thinking about it. And then one day I was out on a run and I was thinking about this story and how in the world I could end it. And boom, it just came to me. It was the most amazing thing. And I stopped in the middle of the path and I started crying because that idea was just so perfect that it made all that waiting and trying to figure it out worthwhile.
You can't just sit down and say, I'm going to have a good idea right now. That doesn't work for anybody I know. It sure doesn't work for me. What I have to do is what you just said. You have to kind of commit to it. I'm going to be doing something, going for a walk, going for a drive, going for a run, and I'm going to think about it and just muse on it. Think about it kind of uncritically, just over and over and over. And sooner or later, most of the time, not always, but there's a good chance, something will pop in your brain that'll make you go, aha. And when you go, aha, that's what you're after. That's the punchline. Yeah. That's the payoff.
Such a good feeling. And it is something that you accomplish by refocusing your mental energies on your story. Because if you're out there mowing the yard or doing the dishes or whatever we do, you will find that your brain will go back to that simpler thing, that other person's story, that TV show that you watch. It'll revert to that. So you need to bring it back in and say, no, I'm thinking about my story, and get back on the path of your own story. So that takes a certain amount of experience doing that. You have to try it over and over again, but you'll get good at it.
Yeah.
So just keep getting back to the default that you think about when you're doing a mundane task somewhere is your story.
So when I get writer's block and I get that feeling of, really feels to me like, kind of like I don't really want to write. I'm not driven to write. I'm not dying to write. That's just, for me, that's code for, I need to really think about my story a little bit more, which really means I need to go take a shower.
Or mow the lawn.
Mow the lawn.
Okay.
Wash the dishes.
And sitting in front of a computer while you're blocked is not very productive time. At least it's not for me.
I always say the real writing, the real kind of brainstorming idea of stuff, all that happens away from the keyboard.
So a few other tactics that you might want to try. Number one, show up regularly for your story, just like you would a friend. I mean, to develop a friendship, to develop an understanding about somebody else. In this case, your characters and their motivations and where they're going and what they're doing, you need to show up. So try spending as much time as frequently as possible with your story.
Another thing is, in your mind, don't think, oh, I have another 250 pages to go. What am I doing? Right.
That's crippling.
Or even think about, don't even think about the next chapter, like for my next 10, 15 pages. Just think about the next scene, like the page you're working on, the page after that. And if you can get through that page, a lot of times that'll spark something else and you can kind of continue writing after that.
This is something that I discovered kind of by accident, just having a very busy life and no time during the day, is that if I read my own story right before I go to bed, if I read my last pages or I read my last chapter, and then my subconscious will work on it during the night. And I get the best ideas, like when I'm half asleep, about how I can progress in my story. So I would suggest that after you watch that favorite television show, after you've done everything you need to do, the very last thing before you go to sleep is take your last few pages and read them and see what magic happens in the middle of the night.
And finally, keep a positive mindset. When you're stuck on something, probably the most important thing to do right away is to say, I can figure this out. Even if you don't have a clue. It's like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I will figure this out. Because if you tell yourself, I'm never going to figure this out, then you're not going to. But if you tell yourself, I can figure this out, it kind of unblocks your brain and opens up some channels towards solutions.
So that's it for this episode. Thanks for spending a little time with us, and we hope you'll come back and see us again. Meanwhile, remember, dream big, work hard, don't give up.
For God's sake, keep writing.
There they are, my little friends. They make me cry.
Yeah,
I know.
Think about that.
Do you ever cry over your friends?
Yeah, sometimes I
Yeah.
don't tell them.
Don't tell Mom.